Huh? That's a floetite stone. All right, Floette, Mega Evolve! Ah!
What you just watched was a cutscene from Pokemon Legends ZA with a voice actor I hired to fill in the game's subtitles. It's a small improvement that highlights some of the game's missed potential, and it's one of many fixes we'll explore today. Today we're going to theorycraft to imagine what the perfect version of Pokemon Legends ZA would look like, working to improve cutscenes, Pokemon balancing, the battle system, ZA Royale, megas, boss fights, story, and so much more. But from my experience of making 3 Pokemon ROM hacks, I believe the single most crucial aspect of ZA's improvement lies in adding roller skates. That's it. That's the video. Please like and subscribe. Bye. No, the most important aspect of fixing this game lies in Lumiose City itself. That might sound weird, but when you finish this video and see the big picture, it's going to click. You can think of a game setting like a container. It's the foundation that the entire game's experience is built on. Now, some games like Pokemon Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet choose to use a very big container. And the benefits of this is that you have a lot of room to add stuff, which if done right, can have the benefit of making the world feel expansive and dynamic. When you have a big bowl though, it can be hard to fill it. And this is something that a lot of people were critical about for Legends Arceus. Big containers have to grapple with making sure the game isn't low density and full of shallow experiences. Now, Legends ZA is the complete opposite, opting for actually a very small container. The benefits of this choice, and I think we see that in Lumiose City, is that the game feels pretty deep. Per square feet, there is a lot to do, and it always feels like there's something going on around you. But the challenge that comes with this smaller scope is that it makes it harder to add enough different elements. And this can ultimately lead to player exhaustion in a lack of variety. And so before we can get to catching Pokemon, battling trainers, and progressing in the story, we need to assess how Game Freak deals with this constraint. Now, the game does have a 3D aspect to it, with rooftops and sewers provided some much needed verticality, but 2 more environments really can only do so much. And so it's actually in Wild Zones where the game tries to make a stand in combating this issue of sameness. You have these small little pockets where you've written an excuse into the story that kind of allows you to do anything. This right here was Game Freak's proposed solution to fixing the constraints that come with this design choice. The scope of this city is just a lever. There's nothing good or bad about it. Instead, it all comes down to implementation, and that's what we need to analyze. The first wild area is literally just a road, and so that doesn't really bode well for everything we just considered. Outside of catching new Pokemon, the big goal of Wild Zones is to make the player feel like they're in a different place, and it doesn't do a job of that at all. But what this area serves as is the perfect tutorial. With the modern XP share, you're punished for not having 6 Pokemon, so making you catch a full team to start the game is surprisingly smart. The area also covers pretty much every catching scenario: balls failing, aggressive Pokemon, rooftop catches, and even rare finds with Pichu. And offering this experience in a place that is familiar to the player is actually really important to not overwhelm them. I think these are kind of the elements that are in the head of a developer when they're building something like this. And so it's really in the second Wild Zone where the game wants to start diversifying. And it does. It's certainly small, but for the start of the game, I think that makes sense, and is a relatively fleshed out and dynamic feeling park. Now, next you have Wild Zone 3, which does a worse job of sort of drawing you out of the city, but it's got this big tower that kind of makes it feel still like a point of interest or notable location. And then Wild Zone 4, which is sort of the last required area you have to go to. This is a graveyard, which despite being like so messed up, it actually is the best of the 3. Even in the day, it does take you out of feeling like you're in a city, but at night you go here, you've got ghosts around every corner, there's a giant alpha spinnerack on a wall. It's really well done. And so overall, I actually think the game does a really good job of setting Wild Zones up. It correctly rolls things out slowly, and that's done in a way that leaves room for more creative zones to come later. But from here, the game then doesn't really deliver on that promise. The other 2 non-required early game Wild Zones, 5 and 6, are basically just more roads. They add a few extra hidden courtyards and rooftops, and I think on a first playthrough, they feel fine if things were to continually get better. Wild Zone 7 is another square, but less interesting than Zone 3. And while Wild Zone 8 offers an intense experience in gameplay, it's basically just another square with sand. Wild Zone 9 is then mostly rooftops, and 10 is rooftops with a canal. The batting average of the following 10 are similarly pretty disappointing. Most of these areas are just streets with new Pokemon, and they don't add anything to make the city feel any more dynamic. And in fact, I personally felt that it was often just more fun to catch Pokemon in the actual city biome itself. There's Pidgeotos on the roofs, monkeys on the trees, Trubbish next to garbage. This all felt very cohesive and organic. But Wild Zones lose the city charm while not adding enough to throw away the identity entirely. Now, there are a few areas in the second half that work pretty well. Wild Zone 11 is a marshy area that flows along the river, and it's both a breath of fresh air along with being very well integrated into the city. Wild Zone 14 is an industrial area that makes its steel, rock, and ground types feel right at home. And Wild Zone 12 turns what was previously another river park into a frozen wonderland. You've got a Numel stuck in the ice, and there's even an Avalugg floating in the river like a giant iceberg. And the more I sit in how much I like the transformation of Wild Zone 12, the more I become frustrated with the rest of the game. Like, sure, it could definitely look better. Imagine how much more engaging the places that are just like a road with salamence would feel like. It's a low bar, but I think that alone would have done a lot to alleviate this major issue. But since we're making the perfect version, I'd like to imagine some fixes where they went all out, completely rehauling these areas to make it feel like you forgot you're in a city. For bug types, Wild Zone 13 basically just adds some bigger grass to a street and calls it a day. Imagine if instead this was a commons that had its grass completely overgrown over the head of the player. Imagine scythers and pincers lurking in the grass with small pockets of clearing for Vivillons and Heracross. Vivillon! Sorry. For electric types, they easily could have gone with the old faithful and just made a power plant styled interior building like the one in Kanto. The game has very little interior locations, so this is a frustrating miss. The sandy Wild Zone 8 desert feels good because of its Pokemon, but imagine if there was a Sandstream Pokemon here, whipping up like an insane desert that just completely blots out the city and lowers your visibility. You could actually have the exact same justification for making Wild Zone 12 a true blizzard. There's an Alpha Abomasnow here, so that would make sense. And so instead of being in like a snowy park, which is cool, you could have it completely snowed out so that you can't even see buildings. Now, I do like that Pokemon centers are super accessible, but what if there was like one giant central one and it got taken over by like Clefables and Kangaskhan? You could take the more cerebral Pokemon and put them in a place where there's a high level of human mental output, like maybe take an art gallery, add some fairy, psychics, or even ghost types to it. I think fire would be a hard area to explain in a city. Maybe you could say a Pokemon caused a fissure that turned into like a mini volcano or something. Actually, that would be pretty sick and really add to the chaos of this whole system. Now, Masuda has said that Glittering Cave in X and Y was sort of inspired by the Paris catacombs, but I kind of wish that there had been an area of the sewers that was like more spooky, maybe had just ghosts or something. Or how about like a real park? Like Wild Zone Area 2 fills a very good purpose for the start of the game, but that's like a small park. And I would love if this game had had one of those big giant parks that are in some cities where you go into them and you actually don't feel like you're in a city. There's a few on the outskirts of Paris even that are like 2,500 acres and there's real trees and rivers and stuff. A lot of people wanted to be able to leave the city, and I think that if you put this on the edge of it where it's like a zone that you load into, it would have created like a pretty good compromise. I can imagine this feeling like the same purpose as the Safari Zone in Kanto. You could even justify like the Pokemon grew the trees to be massive, and there's a second wild zone up top where there's a bunch of birds like Altaria or Skarmory in the trees. Or, oh my gosh, like imagine if dragons took over the very top of the Prism Tower, not like the interior, but literally just built a giant nest on top that you could fly up to, and like there's your Salamence. You look out, it's mountains and no city. The point is, the snowy area shows us that Game Freak was willing to add some uniqueness to their locations. I'm like one guy who just spent 30 minutes thinking about this, and a lot of these ideas aren't really that hard. And look, I have really enjoyed myself in Lumiose City, but I think I just would have enjoyed it even more if the wild zones felt a little more interesting. It's also kind of lame that cafes don't have interiors, considering they literally did this in X and Y. Sure, those mostly were copy and pasted, but getting a menu page for places like the Stone Emporium or the Pokeball store would have been so cool to go in and look around at how everything is all set up. You can certainly go on and on about the interior buildings, but really I would just like a few relevant interiors and then a huge overhaul to the wild system. But regardless, with these changes, we fix our container and make our first step towards building the perfect version of Legends ZA. Now, one thing I love about ZA compared to older games is just how much less grinding you have to do. And that less grind, more play mindset is exactly why when I wanted to play Stardew Valley, I fired up today's sponsor wand. Check this out. I open the desktop app and it automatically finds my game in my library. Then I launch Stardew, hit Alt-W to pull up the in-game overlay and turn unlimited energy on. It's really nice when you're just looking to focus on building and layout without the fatigue timer. I can tidy paths, redo layouts, and make some real progress even when I'm on a time constraint. I also love the overlays, guides, and maps that keep me progressing without having to tab out of my game. I can check the best fishing times and use instant fish bite or easy fish catch for quality of life. And one lets you do this for over 3,500 single player games. There's Hades 2, Baldur's Gate 3, and even Hollow Knight Silksong. Speaking of Hollow Knight, Wand's interactive map lets you see all of the game's areas from the very start instead of buying them. And some supported games even let you teleport. So if you're interested in fine-tuning your game time, you can check out Wand for free at wand.gg/SmithPlays Pokemon or click the top link in the description. Sponsors like this literally allow us to make these giant videos, so please go check them out. Rank Y. Quality of life. Quality of life features offer a way to massively improve player experience without altering its core gameplay. For example, the new Pokeball collector guy gives you back your Pokeballs, and that is a pretty sick feature, honestly. But while taken heavily from Legends Arceus, the catching mechanics themselves feel a lot less in-depth. Arceus had different ball types with different properties that flew differently in the air. Here, every ball throws the same. And the range to catch Pokemon has been set to an immersion breaking level that's like 15 feet or less in front of you. Like, do you remember seeing players sniping the flying Gyarados out of the air in PLA? For a game that's still very dedicated to catching Pokemon, I would much rather have seen them just keep the Arceus system. Now, the linking cord was an item in Legends Arceus that you could give a Pokemon that normally evolves through trade. I don't understand why this didn't come back. Of course, we would add it if this was a legacy game, and we'd also probably just make it so that Pokemon like Caesar just evolve when you give them a metal coat, kind of like an evolution stone. Now, I've seen people talk about making the EXP share optional. X and Y has shown us that it's nearly impossible to balance a game when you have both of these options. But if it's properly balanced around the EXP share, it still doesn't hurt anyone to have an optional challenge mode. What should be in the game, though, is an option to turn off autosave. The option doesn't hurt anyone, but removing it does. Now, the day and night cycle is great in helping the city feel dynamic, but the interruption screen is pretty clunky. That's a kind way to put it. I'm definitely not jaded because I've been mid-catch on an alpha Pokemon while it shifted to daytime. It's definitely not happened to me. Look, I found the first time you had the day and night cycle, it was charming. It kind of set the city up in a nice way. But this pops up even if you didn't participate in the trainer battles at night. It's a very big intrusion into the immersiveness of the game. And I think at the very least, they could have made it so that it didn't just like blanket reset every Pokemon. Now, on the note of side quests, Zach, one of the legacy devs, actually had a good point here. Some of the quests are really good in adding extra flavor to the world around you, but a lot of them just boil down to having battles. And I think that realistically, if we're building the perfect version of ZA, this would have been a good opportunity to add in more characters from X and Y. You don't want to put them in the main quests because they'd overshadow the new characters and lead to nostalgia bait complaints, but as optional side quests, this would add depth and a very satisfying reward for exploring. The Mabel quests broadly feel like an upgrade from Legends Arceus. One thing I've seen criticized a lot that I would not change is the 1,000 battle quest requirements for the shiny charm. I think people are bothered by this quest because they can like see it very readily saying you haven't got this. I'm not a shiny expert, but this seems to be the easiest game ever for catching shinies. So I don't think it would make sense to make something that makes it even easy to get. I do find Mabel's completed quests kind of annoying. You have this massive list of like catching fire types 1, catching fire types part 2, and it's like, look, if I caught 15 fire types, I'm pretty sure that means I've caught 3. I think it would have been smoother to represent this with a progress bar. And while trivializing for the difficulty, the optional screw collecting side quest thing is a lot of fun. I just think that they probably should have added some sort of radar system for it in the post game, or maybe even the guy that tells you how many screws you have left could say like, you have screws left in these zones, so that you at least narrow the search down to like not the entire city for one single screw to get that canary plush. Now, I also understand a lot of people were upset that they removed the riding mechanic from this game, but I think that would have felt really weird in a city. But I just wish they could have come up with like some sort of idea to improve mobility, like some kind of device that could alleviate the problems associated with the force of friction. You could take shoes and put little tiny wheels on them, and it would allow the player to glide across the streets effortlessly. Rank X, Pokemon availability and the Pokedex. As we discussed in our review of Pokemon X and Y, Kalos had a very bloated Pokedex, which resulted in a lack of clear vision for the game. Kalos was a similar size to previous games, but with double the number of Pokemon, team building felt bloated and nothing was truly significant. In ZA, the dex not only feels much more thought out, but the Kalos natives are finally given a spotlight to shine. And while many people have complained that this dex is not as big as other modern Pokemon ones, because we have a smaller map, its deck size is in accordance with it. The distribution of types is also really well done. There's a small, healthy skew towards more common types, but all are very well represented. The game also does a good job with not having too many Pokemon in the early game. The tendency from players is to want every single Pokemon to be available at the very start of the game, and this actually just overall hurts the gameplay experience. But what's especially nice is if you want to go out of your way, you can search rooftops and other areas around the actual city to find some more rare Pokemon. A lot of Pokemon also got updated 3D models, and man, does it feel good. I know a lot of online discourse has fairly gone into criticizing the buildings, but I feel like there is not enough praise for the new animations. There's just so much attention put into these guys, from like the way Totodile plops down on a chair at cafes, to Aeron's steel feet walking across stone, or even something that has been missing forever, like Blastoise's cannons actually shooting water. So while I suppose it is still a low bar, Pokemon animation is at its absolute best here. Now, on notes of availability, the game does a really good job of ensuring that most Pokemon have an actual niche. Like, yeah, anything that doesn't have a Mega is going to be outclassed in the late game, but take the evolutions for example. If their stones were stuck in the late game, they'd be outclassed, but Game Freak very smartly put their stones at the start of the game, so they serve a niche in being really powerful early game Pokemon that then fall off compared to Megas. Tons of other Pokemon see similar treatment, but availability still isn't perfect. First, you're not getting access to revive fossils until after rank F, which is when you get Megas. And you're getting Tyrant and Amora at like level 20. So they don't have a Mega, they evolve at level 40, and they're already coming below the level of your team. As Kalos natives, these Pokemon should have been given a better chance to shine, but even worse is that you can get Aerodactyl at the exact same point, and its Megastone is instantly available. To fix this, I would make Amora and Tyrant available at level 20 as soon as you start the Emma Looker Bureau quest, and then have Aerodactyl come at rank F, but like level 30. There's also Pokemon with stupid late availability that makes them pretty bad. Drampa and Kangaskhan are both not catchable until rank B. This stage in the game has a level 62 Alpha Salamence, so Drampa is just completely outclassed. They just needed to make these guys earlier. Steelix and Scizor are also locked to the first metal coat, not coming until rank A. Considering their Megastones come at rank F and they're both trade evolutions, I don't understand why the metal coat isn't available sooner. And so it is actually a pretty short list because I only have one more Pokemon that I would majorly fix. The one other Pokemon that I think is just plain useless is Klefki. And given its Steel Fairy niche, this actually would have been a really nice pickup had it come as early as like Emolga and Hawlucha. But that's actually where my criticism ends. And I think that does a pretty good job job to show how generally good a job they did of balancing Pokemon. Rank W, the battle system. Guys, let's just take a moment. New battle system in Pokemon. It's pretty cool. The highest praise that I have for the ZA battle system is that it comes closest to making the player feel like an actual Pokemon trainer. The system is not perfect, it can be buggy at times, and it is shallow compared to many other real-time combat RPGs. But at the end of the day, I don't know, man, it's just a lot of fun. From the move selection to suggesting pivoting but not physically controlling the Pokemon, while it is annoying in the context of other real-time RPGs, it just feels a lot like Pokemon battles from the anime. And as much as I want to sit here and be objective for the Nintendo haters and or so people don't think I'm a 100% Nintendo shill, getting to command a Charizard to send out a Fire Blast on a Rogue Mega and seeing that same kanji that I've been seeing since like 2000 on my Game Boy, I'm sorry, it's just sick, okay? It's just sick. Let's go a little deeper though. I love how the system instantly grabs you. The first fight of your first full night in a battle zone has you getting tricked into a battle and caught off guard as you dash through a corridor with a blind spot towards an item. This does a great job of setting the higher paced tone that this mode is all about. As you go through the section, you're then introduced to the rest of the basics like sneaking up on trainers, completing your ticket, and even seeing higher ranked trainers. So the biggest positives I have for this mode is generally just that it boils down to being fast. I like the turn-based system, but I like going fast. I also like that this time the game has maintained the same underlying fundamentals. Like if you've played other Pokemon games, you know, you're going into this knowing Ember does 40 damage and Flamethrower does 90. Whereas in PLA, it was more like learning a new system. And so for someone who's deep in the weeds, this just made a whole lot more sense. Now, probably the smartest thing that this whole system does is add the plus move meter. Previously, like in X and Y, Pokemon without Mega Evolutions just were worse. Game Freak very smartly implemented this system as a way for Pokemon without Megas to stay competitive. Now, my biggest general complaint about the battle system is just that it felt kind of unpolished. Whenever I do a night session of battles on rooftops, there would always be like one fight where the trainer's Pokemon was flying off the roof, or my Pokemon couldn't get access to the one it's fighting with like a 3-foot gap in a ceiling. It was also really frustrating to see powerful attacks completely absorbed by environmental assets. Like, I just wish it could have been a little better than trees entirely absorbing fire blasts. I also found that battles in small corridors got cramped once you got into the late game with fully evolved Mons. Like, sure, Totodile was fine, but especially if you're catching some of the larger alphas, those areas just get so tight. And while hilarious, it was also kind of weird that like you could be hiding in a bush next to a 10-foot Mega Scolipede and the trainer would just be like, huh, I guess no one's over here. It is also really frustrating when sneaking up on trainers. If your Pokemon was like mid-attack or its projectile was mid-air, if the trainer caught you before it landed, the hit just didn't register. And there were some cases where the Fire Blast would be mid-air, the trainer would recognize me and get the jump on my team, leaving my Pokemon stunned. That's particularly frustrating because the entire system of enemy trainers sneaking up on you is just non-existent. Like, they should have made it so that as the game progresses, there's more and more trainers actually running around that you have to be cautious of. But like, instead we got this system where other trainers spot you as your mid-attack, and it's just like so lazy. I also didn't like how overpowered status moves were. Recalling Pokemon is generally quite overpowered, so they really should have made it that status is paused while your Pokemon is away. Now, move selection is great, and for the most part came pretty natural. I think learning to have your Pokemon dodge attacks should have been covered in the tutorial. I just kind of had to figure it out on my own, and I still don't even feel confident if I'm using it like correctly. A tutorial on this would have been much more appreciated than diving around a rug in the hotel. Removing PP also made me realize how much I don't care about PP. Like, thinking back to older games, say Pokemon Emerald, I might actually care about PP in an individual fight for like one gym leader and then the Elite Four, whereas every other fight, you can always just go back to the Pokemon Center and heal. So PP just ends up being a time sink constraint for 99% of the game. This has inspired me to hope that maybe in future games, while not removing PP, they make it so that PP regenerates after every fight. The other big change is that moves don't miss for the most part in trainer trainer battles. Again, I don't know, this felt like poorly covered. Sometimes my Gyarados would shoot a Hydro Pump at a Pokemon point blank and miss. Rock Slide was another move that I found would miss, but for the most part, moves don't miss. I don't know, missing was a little weird. But I liked that generally missing was replaced with cooldown. So like the big power moves such as Fire Blast just have a longer cooldown than the weaker moves. I also wish they had a tutorial on speed. Like the 5 other stats are unchanged, so that's fine, but it shouldn't take me watching a YouTube video doing a frame by frame breakdown to get an understanding of how and exactly the speed mechanic works in this game. In this game, the speed stat affects the cooldown timers on your moves. I mean, maybe that actually just is a critique of Pokemon broadly, like they've never done tutorials for stats. So anyway, those are general thoughts. More broadly speaking, I did find myself missing the turn-based system whenever we got to major fights. I think the issue was that these major fights just went so fast where like even the Mega would pop out and be gone within 10 seconds and then the fight's over. And it just always felt kind of anticlimactic. Now I know I don't speak for everyone here, but if it was my personal perfect version, I would make it so that all major fights are still fought on the turn-based system. There's actually been a lot of talk of whether we'd ever see something like this in future games. And thinking about Gen 10, can't help but pray for a hybrid. I would love to see a system where battling wild Pokemon and maybe even like trainers 10 levels weaker than you would actually just go to real time. Real time is nice for the lower stakes fights because it just helps speed along an inevitable outcome. But then of course you retain the iconic and integral turn-based system for any major fight. Rank V, abilities. Okay, this is a big enough deal that it deserves its own subsection. Okay. Looking back to PLA, that game also did not have abilities. And I just want to preface that ZA is way better without abilities than PLA was. But as I have played on, I still have once again grown to really hate this disclusion. Without abilities, the depth of what can make a Pokemon good is pushed back to stats, typings, and moves, just like in the old games. And pairing that with the modern dynamic of Pokemon just feels bad. Now, even when I first started playing this game, the instant point I made against this was that it's a new combat system and adding abilities would probably make things too complicated. First of all, as time went on, I was wanting stuff to be more complicated, but more importantly is that it doesn't actually make things more complicated. The elephant in the room we first have to address is the fact that even they balance some Pokemon around removing their abilities. Medicham and the like's pure power was replaced with a simple plus 40% to attack. And sure, Medicham, Mawile, Megastarmie, whatever. Yeah, they needed the boost, but they're not the only Pokemon that gets shafted without their ability. I know that Bunnelby and Diggersby only get huge power as a hidden ability, but like, why couldn't they also have got it? A 40% buff would have only put its attack at 78, so it's not like it would have been overpowered. Okay, you've got the likes of Gyarados that losing Intimidate actually probably helps balance it, but like, take Mega Aerodactyl's Tough Claws. This gives all its contact moves a 33% damage boost. And because Aerodactyl mostly uses contact moves, this pushes its 135 attack basically up to 175. Mega Aerodactyl is fast, but with 135 attack, it is just not strong enough to do the job that it needs to do. It wants to one-shot Pokemon, but it's so frail that if it doesn't hit that target, it basically just dies in like 2 hits. Thinking about it, Mega Medicham basically got 40% of its original boost. So like, why couldn't you have just given Aerodactyl 15 more attack? Without adaptability, Lucario is another Mega that just is not strong enough to really handle its frailty. And while I understand that both of these abilities are a little bit more specific, you probably could have gotten away with just like, again, a very simple plus 10, plus 15 attack and call it a day. But like, why even stop here? What is so hard about programming Electros to not take damage from ground moves? It's not just a massive nerf, but it also removes the defining piece of identity for the Pokemon. Mawile is the Ruby versional twin to Sableye. Mawile got its attack boosted, but Sableye lost Magic Bounce and now it's terrible. Lopunny without Scrappy is like removing the only niche thing Lopunny could do, which was hit ghost types with fighting and normal moves. Not that that's even really important in this game, because the only niche that really applied to was Aegislash, which is also shafted by the way its stance change works in this game. And even more frustrating than that, abilities would have been such an awesome opportunity to show off even more flavor. Imagine if the Firestarter's Blaze ability worked like it did in the anime, where the Pokemon glows with energy when it gets in low health. Or what if the area around Mega Charizard Y got all heat wavy looking when it came out because of its drought ability? Or imagine Auroras, who really misses the refrigerate ability. Like, all its normal type moves get a little blue added, like a blue color tinge over all the white in the animations. There's just very few cases where abilities would be hard to program in. Sure, maybe something like Aerodactyl's Pressure that lowers PP might take a bit of difficult tweaking, but like, broadly speaking, I can't see it being that difficult, and it just would have helped with balance, depth, and even potential flavor. Rank F? Rank F. ZA Royale. Now, with the foundational battle system established and hopefully fixed, this leads us to the game's alternative battle style league, ZA Royale. Now, from a broad perspective, what I really like about this system is that it is an attempt to step away from the gym leagues. Rather than fighting an established person, you're fighting a peer that has the exact same goal as you. It's a very clever reframing of what are still essentially gym fights, and it should, in theory, get away from the sort of programmed feeling of gym battles, and yet somehow still manages to feel so programmed. So when you or any random NPC go into a battle zone, you fight all night, you're trying to get tickets, you win, you go up in tickets, and if you get enough tickets, you get a special challenger ticket, and that allows you to fight someone else with a challenger ticket to ascend in ranks. Sick, so sick, except for the fact that the challenger is predetermined, which basically makes this the exact same thing as gym battles. Now, I get the idea is like to build tension, like, oh, I gotta fight X and Y next. This huge hole could have been fixed if they just made it so that you get the person assigned after you get a challenger ticket. The worst oversight though, and you probably all knew this was coming, is the rank skip. After the V rank promotion match, the player defeats Vinny and ascends all the way to rank F, skipping over half the alphabet. Now, general critique you've seen across the internet, the game is called Legends ZA, and its main premise is around the ZA tournament. So skipping 16 letters does kind of mitigate the significance of that. That said, I do understand the logic behind this decision. As the game was designed to scale, grinding 26 ranks would have put you at like level 200. It would also probably have just been a pretty boring grind. And also, for every additional promotion rank trainer you fight, they become less significant. As a YouTuber, I also have to be sympathetic to the marketability of a product. There are ROM hacks that offer way more features than the Legacy series, but of course I'm gonna have an engaging title. Sorry that it's kind of clickbaity, but like, yeah, I want people to engage with the content I produce. So like, I'm not gonna criticize that because it would be very hypocritical of me. Legends ZA is a really smart title, and the game does have a 26 tier online battle system, so it's also not entirely clickbait. Sorry though, that is my one Nintendo shill defense, just because I am a YouTuber. That doesn't mean the rank jump is off the hook. The way I want to critique it is in its actual implementation. When you beat Vinny, the game says you were specially promoted to rank F. Tawny comes over to congratulate you and literally doesn't even make mention of these extraordinary circumstances. Tawny just kind of acts like the letter that comes before V is F, and there are 16 letters missing from the alphabet. She then fights Vinny, who upon losing, then also sends Tawny to F rank as well. And like, that's it. there's no mention, like maybe Quasortico did it because they've got special hookups to rank jump. Like, I don't think there is a worse way to do this. Look, if we're accepting that the skip has to exist, couldn't you have just had Vinny explain it? Like, he could say, they don't have a lot of trainers with Mega Evolution, and they need trainers with Mega Evolution to deal with the Rogue Megas, and if you can Mega Evolve, you're automatically a Rank F trainer. Or maybe you're just so strong that you're a Rank F trainer. Or God, I don't know, maybe Vinny is a Rank F trainer, and if you beat a trainer that is way higher than you, you just automatically ascend to their level. So, like, horribly executed, and also this should be a big moment. Like, you just skipped 16 ranks. It's like, because they realized it was clunky, they want to gloss over it, but then in doing that, you also just kind of kill what should have been a big climax to the early game. I'm just a ROM hacker, I don't know anything, but maybe they also could have had a tournament. If I was making this game, this is what I would have done. Sort of mirrors the Jacynth thing. You could have them say they're looking for trainers to ascend to rank F. Like, they could say they've assembled 16 trainers to compete in a round robin tournament, and the last match is you versus Tawny. And then, I don't know, because Vinny sees you're both so good, he's like, I'll challenge you, and if you both win, you'll both get rank F. Like, again, they could have done anything and it would have been better. Rank E. Major fights. Now, of course, if you follow the channel, you know one of my favorite topics is team building. Also, if you're this deep in the video, you should probably subscribe so that you don't have to depend on the YouTube algorithm to feed you our videos. Even you, person who's watching this one on a TV, yeah, I know the YouTube trends these days. It takes 3 clicks. Okay, just get the remote, boop, 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 do it. You won't be disappointed. Anyway, starting things off with Z rank Zach, we have Slowpoke, which is an interesting pick, I guess. But with Pikachu and Pidgey, this kind of feels like some Kanto nostalgia bait. It's one of the few times this happens. And also, since this kind of acts like a tutorial, it kind of makes sense to use popular Pokemon with well-known types. And once you get to Yvonne's team, you kind of realize that that's exactly what they're doing. Swirlix, Spritzee, and Vivillon are really great choices for the game's first actual real fights. The 2 Mono Fairies only give her a common weakness to poison, since steel isn't abundant in the early game. So it's a solid pick that sets the stage for letting Gen 6 Pokemon shine. Now for Zavi, his Venipede probably should have been replaced, since its evolution is going to be used in another promotion fight. With Roselia, it also means that there's 2 Mons with a fire, flying, and psychic weakness that both serve as the spike setters. With Reflect, Kadabra is definitely an intimidating pick though. But I really like how this fight built, because once his Furfrou comes out, you've probably got the spikes on the field, it's probably got the wall set up, and this thing is strong for this point in the game. So it's like set up, and all of a sudden you're in this fight that is pretty seriously challenging. But overall, once again, I'm gonna say no changes. Now, okay, Rentaro. I get that he is W for waiter, but the inconsistency of this makes me die inside. But maybe not quite as much as the team of 3 Simmies. I also get that in X and Y, he had 3 unevolved Pans. And also, like, there's not many Gen 6 options to throw in here. But like, I just think this fight would have been a lot cooler as a side quest and not a main one. At this point, I would actually like to see a trainer running an unevolved Sliggoo, because I just think it's a cool Pokemon that is really underrepresented. Actually, you could even just give it to him and I'd be fine with that. I just think 4 Pokemon down to 3 and no Gen 6 Pokemon is a bit of a miss. Now, the next fight definitely brings it back. Vinny leads Houndoom with Fire Fang, Fire Spin, Bite, and Roar. Roar isn't consistent, but it's kind of cool when it actually works in sending your Pokemon back into the Fire Spin. Now, Sharpedo is also a pretty strong Pokemon, but I really appreciate this attention to detail. If you think about it, these are 2 Pokemon that resist dark moves, and what Pokemon have you just been handed for free that's gonna stomp the game right now is a dark type Absol. So very nice attention to detail from Game Freak. Now, a lot of people are going to clown on his Baneri. I kind of love it. I think it's super charming and actually also quite realistic. Like, yeah, where are these trainers that just have these like unevolved Pokemon they just caught? I just feel like it's not that common. My only thing is that if you're going to include this, they probably should have also added in a 5th Pokemon. Now, while it's not in the game, personally, I would add a Cacturn because that would give you Fire Dark, Water Dark, and then Grass Dark. Now, as for his Ace Mega Drampa, this is a super late catch for the player. So while that hurts its availability and, makes it a bad Pokemon, it does have the effect where, like, unless you've had it leaked, you've never seen this thing before, and it makes for a very cool moment for the first trainer fight with a Mega. Now, Canary is the next trainer, and I like that her grandfather Tarragon is a ground type trainer while she chose to be electric. It shows the whole teenage experience of like, I don't want to be like my family, but her Heliolisk knows Bulldoze, and she has a Stunfisk. So it's like she's rebelling, but also can't help but take influence from her grandfather. Also really like how this fight is directly after Tarragon, because I'm sure there were a lot of players that ran a water type for Tarragon and then immediately went into Canary only to get, electrified. Now, up to this point in the game, no single fight has been a monotype trainer, and this has actually made these fights a lot more balanced. So the challenge that comes in the second half is, in order for these fights to remain competitive, the learn sets and typing of these Pokemon needs to be really dialed in. My biggest complaint about this fight is that on top of Electros losing Levitate, none of her Pokemon can hit ground super effectively. Ampharos has Power Gem and Dragon Pulse, that's sick, but where is Ice Punch? Heliolisk could have had Surf or Solar Beam. And actually on that note, like, why does this thing have Parabolic Charge when it already learned Thunderbolt? Stunfisk also has Mudshot 8 levels after it learns Earthquake. And considering that this is the point where the game starts handing you a bunch of free alphas, it's very weird to me that they restrain Canary. It's backwards. Like the better teams are at the start of the game and you don't hold back, and then you do hold back for Canary in the later game when you are gonna have access to lots of good moves. And we see a very similar learn set issue with Ivor. Heracross is using the 75 power pin missile that it learned at level 10 when it has access to Mega Horn. Medicham is stuck with Rock Smash from level 14 when it could be using Power Up Punch, Focus Blast, or even Close Combat. And don't forget, even with the attack boost, it did still get quite nerfed. Machamp is using Brutal Swing from level 12 despite also learning Knockoff. And surely Heavy Slam would have been more fitting to deal with fairies. Then Mega Phalanx is sitting one level under where it gets Close Combat. Now, in fairness, No Retreat is very good, and Steel and Rock coverage does benefit again, but I just have to point out that these learn sets are not where they should be considering how high level we are now. Corbeau's whole thing is that he is the head of the Rust Syndicate, an atrocious crime organization, so he has to maintain a powerful air and intimidating presence to those none the wiser. So it's no surprise to me that he has the most atrocious thing you can see in Pokemon, a Gyarados. Okay, for real though, do we need Gyarados here? Like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be me for a second. This just feels so X and Y Lysander. God, even for me, that is like such a nerdy thing to say. And I do get that Corbeau probably has a Gyarados based off of Lysander's influence, but it's just like, we got a bad guy, Flexi Seal meme, hit him with the Gyarados. It's especially frustrating when like Klawitzer exists. It fits the theme. It doesn't have the 4x weakness. And oh, look, it learns Dark Pulse, Dragon Pulse, and Bounce. The same moves that Gyarados learns. Now, Arbok has Poison Jab a level over where it can learn Gunk Shot, but Roserade and Scolipede have good learn sets, with Shadow Ball covering the Psychic weakness on Roserade and Earthquake covering Fire and Rock types for Scolipede. And so as much as I dislike the inclusion of Gyarados, I have to say that this is a pretty well-built team. Now, with Jacinthe, we finally have 5 Pokemon. Jacinthe starts with a level 57 Carbink, which seems pretty underpowered by this point in the game, but as a Stealth Rock opener, it does at least fill a role. Mawile is a solid addition with different weaknesses to Carbink, which will usually force a switch on the player. Firefang is also great since you'd likely to have a Steel type out for Carbink's main weakness. I also think that Aurorus is pretty cool for a non-fairy type pick. I would personally give it Stone Edge and maybe some screens, since like that would be so fitting because Jacinthe's whole thing is like she has her own screens or whatever. Gardevoir is also a great pick with fire coverage for steals and Calm Mind for Boom Blast and Psychic. And I felt like Mega Clefable was also sitting pretty well. Probably once again the most interesting team we've had so far. Now the final trainer of the ZA Royale is Grisham. The final trainer is Grisham. This guy and Tawny are both kind of filling the role of champion in my mind. Both have 6 Pokemon, both have very diverse teams, but Grisham specifically has 2 pseudos, which really pushes them there a little bit further. I love the diversity here, but again, our learn sets are struggling. Pangoro is good, but like, why does it not have close combat at level 61? It also gets Outrage at level 50. Like, don't you think that's a better move for an X-Team Flare member who is like angry about being shunned or something? I don't know. I don't know. Malabar's also weird, where they gave it Psyshock, but it really wants Psycho Cut. It also feels like a weird decision considering that you just fought Emma's Mega Malamar. There's also Pyroar sitting with Snarl at level 16, while it could have had Dark Pulse. And like, yes, again, Tyranitar, Salamence, and Mega Charizard X do make this team pretty significant, but it's kind of frustrating that it has to be made significant from a bunch of non-Gen 6 Pokemon. Again, though, you could say that Tawny serves as this game's champion equivalent, and she does bring some really good moves here, but I especially like this team for feeling quintessentially ZA. Like, it's not Kalos or X and Y themed. Like, even without the Megas, if you look at any one of these teams, you're always gonna think, oh, that's a ZA team. Manectric is the only one that's like majorly out of place, but like also why not Manectric? You know, it's fine here. We love you, Manectric. We welcome you. So as a whole, ZA does a pretty good job with team composition and is really only held back through learned sets. Now, yeah, the screw system and EXP candies can break this game wide open, but those are side systems that can very easily be ignored or even missed to a lot of players. I think alpha Pokemon actually hurt balancing the most. It's just really hard to balance the game when you have some trainers running their Mareep from Wild Zone 1 and some people picking up like plus 20 level, alpha Pokemon at rank F. Ultimately, though, it's the variety between these fights and Rogue Megas that I think work together to make what is always going to offer at least some pushback to like any type of player. Rank D, Rogue Megas. Okay, I got to admit that like, to me, these felt like the main dish of ZA. I spent most of my time in these fights thinking like, what the hell? I'm playing a Pokemon game right now. This is so cool. Diving into the weeds though, the first thing I was happy with was type distribution. Game Freak ensured we saw at least one of every type outside of normal, with only Dragon and Poison having more than 2 appearances. Also comparing things to PLA, this is just a massive step up. Really, the only thing PLA did better were the arenas. Like in this game, you're kind of getting enveloped in this sort of bubble of mega energy, kind of almost like domain expansion. These generic locations were fine to start, but as things went on, I was kind of hoping that we would have more like environmentally themed battle zones that were actually relevant to the Pokemon. With that said though, let's run through the fights themselves. Absol is the obvious tutorial fight, complete with the good old-fashioned Mega Lucario. And honestly, I love it. It's just like, it's perfect. It's like, okay, we're back to X and Y. What I especially like about this fight though is that your Lucario's loadout gives you a blueprint for planning future fights. You have Aura Sphere for a safer ranged attack that can be followed up by a quick priority punch to get in close and then double down with Rock Smash. The game also gives you an opportunity to try out Protect on Retaliation. To be honest, I mostly would just give my Pokemon the strongest moves possible, but I really like that they show this to the player. Now, your first 3 real rogue fights see Pokemon from the elemental trio of Fire, Grass, and Water. This is a really nice setup in that it gives these rogue fights like some cohesion. I also like that all these Pokemon are bulkier and slower so that it gives you like wiggle room to make mistakes as you're still figuring things out. My biggest fear after this point was that things were going to start to feel repetitive. But the E-rank fights do a good job to switch it up, giving you some vastly different styles of opponents. Beedrill is a frail speedster that sometimes flies to the middle of the map and spams Pin Missile. Banette makes copies of itself that can distract you from attacking its main body. And Hawlucha is just like this super aggro fighter that wants to get up close and punch you in the face. It's a big switch up from F-rank, and their playstyles all have real personality that relates to the design and stat profile of the Pokemon. Now, the D tier sees Ampharos as the first electric type fight. Now, with the little pockets bits of electricity and small central discharge, this fight was lacking what I recognize as like the main trait of electricity. I'm just surprised we didn't see like long range arcing bolts across the map or even like a bunch of thunderbolts constantly raining down. They were really smart with Mawile though. You're starting to get kind of comfortable with the playstyle, and then Mawile breaks the rules and goes outside the playable bounds. It also has attack that like on first attempt is really hard to pattern recognize, and I got absolutely wrecked by this thing. And as for Mega Barbaracle, or Frieza should I say, looks sick, looks so sick, coolest mega pose, and also very lethal. Now in C tier, Altaria was another miss for me. Look, I did love seeing the big fluffy Altaria just like chilling in the middle of the map. Just sick, but it just like doesn't really work as a boss. It's way too defensive, and I just found that this was a pretty like boring fight. Frostlass definitely makes up for it though with what kind of almost feels like it was meant to be a Gigantamax form. Stylistically, this was probably my personal favorite fight. And while Venusaur offered something unique with its healing shrubs, this felt super out of place. I hate that there was only one Kanto starter here. Like, this not only makes Venusaur way worse for playthroughs, but it's like, this is a trio and you either gotta go with all of them or none of them. Also, the fact that Grisham has Charizard X would have made it like so easy to add Charizard Y, which feels like the more cohesive three because it retains Charizard's colors, but it would have also felt pretty nostalgia baity, so I get why they didn't. There is, however, an even better solution. Okay, so the final rank of B tier Rogue Megas is Dragonite, Tyranitar, and Starmie. Side note, the Dragonite fight is so sick when it starts raining down Hyper Beams, and that is how I felt as a child when I was fighting Lance in the Elite Four, so it was very cool to me, but I am getting sidetracked. This is such an awkward trio. You have two Pseudos and Patrick Star. To not complete the Pseudo trio is like even worse than just having Venusaur in C tier. Here's my fix. You put Venusaur stones with the other Kanto Mega Starter stones, and you just remove it from this fight entirely. He doesn't want to be there, man. I know he's having a good time chilling on the gazebo, but like, let him stay chilling on the gazebo. From here, oh my God. 30. From here, we move Starmie down into the C tier. The star with legs does not need to go with the Pseudos. And then you bring in Metagross, who has like absolutely no appearance in this game. Like, Salamence and Garchomp both have really good niches, and that Garchomp is the first Pseudo you can get Mega access to, and Salamence is a good late game pickup, but this trio of Pseudos work so particularly well together. You don't need Salamence because Dragonite is like the original dragon, the 4 times weak to Ice Sky, while the other two are the only non-dragon Pseudos that also showed up right after it. This would add such a beautiful symmetry to send off the Rogue fights, and I'm so mad that we didn't get it. Broadly speaking though, these fights were the highlights of my experience. Rank C, Mega Evolutions. I'm also pretty happy with the Mega designs. I found this to be a pretty difficult discussion-based topic just because it's so subjective. But I think one way to find some level ground is like to just compare these designs to Gen 6's. Gen 6 Mega design did like 2 things. The first was like, it just kept it similar to its core and then added stuff. So like Pinsir gets wings, Aerodactyl gets spikes, Alakazam gets spoons, Ampharos gets hair. And then the other design was like closer to original evolution, where it stays familiar to its original design, but like kind of evolves. This is kind of like what you see with the Kanto starters, Gengar, Gyarados, Mewtwo, Heracross, and so on. Now, you can certainly just dislike Megas at all. That is so valid, like so valid. But if we're talking within the context of Gen 6 Megas, I think that these are vastly better. Emboar is a total badass and just kind of like peak Mega design. You have a clear resemblance to the original while also achieving a unique glow up. Meganium is a similar sized dub, but for a different reason. This design falls more in the just added something camp, but it's an example of it done right. The flowers affirm its goofy nature, while small details like disco pants and antenna ensure it isn't just an Aerodactyl with spikes. Totodile is my favorite starter of all time. And while I think the return to big head goofy Totodile on the Mega is fun, I just kind of fall in the camp as most people that like I don't like the execution. There's a lot of artists who have done better jobs of this that I personally think just look way better. So yeah, I do like his dragon typing though. Halucha is another peak design, perfectly balanced between more badass without losing the charm of its original. Phalanx is an example of just like finding the perfect idea for a specific Pokemon. Barbracle is Barbracle. I mean, on that note, Frostlass is Frostlass. I never loved Malamar, but this design is also really smart. Electros just seems to work, and I especially love that the little pluses and minuses on its wings like actually change. Is a nice fun little detail there. Skarmory, like Gen 2 fanboy here. This thing looks sick. It's shiny. Also goes back to original Skarmory if you missed the color. Just great execution all around. Dragalge takes what is already a pretty clever design and gets even more clever. Chandelure is perfect. I'm sorry, I know people don't all like Chandelure because it's basic, but that's what I think makes it good. Like, I don't know, Chandelure is just already a sick design and you don't want to ruin that, but they just make it look better. Look, if Mega Kangaskhan or the Lotties were introduced today, there would be a public hanging for these designs. I also really like Drampa and Scolipede, who were Pokemon that previously I wasn't a fan of, and their designs just kind of fixed them for me. One of the biggest misses, I think people generally agree with this, is Pyroar. Yes, I know, kanji, symbol, but like compared to Meganium, it feels like a case of just adding stuff done wrong. It's lacking the small details that make a design feel complete. And sure, the fact that its symbol goes from like fire to blaze or flame to blaze or something, like that's a cool detail, but it doesn't stop it from being a bad design. I also personally don't love Mega Excadrill. The original design was a win in it being like a little dude with drills. And I don't know, like I get why they took it that way, but it doesn't personally do it for me. As for the Kalos starters, I love Delphox. Greninja kind of feels like he just got a thing. And weirdly, Chestnut suffers from the exact same issue that Venusaur had, which I think is just playing it way too safe. They do get points though for having a cohesive theme. That is fun. One design I'm in between on is Scrafty. I get the complaints that it feels lazy, but it also feels like the perfect design for Scrafty. So I don't know how you could say it's bad. I love that Clefable gets wings and can now fly under the moon, but I don't love the hat. Also might just be me. Originally, I said that people who don't like Mega Dragonite just don't like Dragonite, but are blinded by nostalgia to be able to critique it. A better argument has emerged, which I kind of agree with, which is like it tries to blend both things and doesn't do it well, so you kind of just get the worst of both worlds. I unfortunately just like Dragonite, so like super biased, but I like this design. I get it. Oh yes, and then we have Starmie. Oh, Starmie. Another note here, Starmie is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. Dude, there were so many fan ideas for this thing that turned it into like a spinning death ray. And I'm so mad that we didn't get any of those. At the same time though, Starmie is both horrifying and hilarious. And the hatred for this Pokemon kind of tells me that they achieved exactly what they were going for. Like, this is peak Game Freak trolling. It's exactly the same as the Dunsparce. I hate it, but like, I think they wanted me to hate it. And at the very least, it becoming a physical attacker is way more interesting competitively than if it had just become another like, you know, special sweeper. So with all that considered, I actually like wouldn't really change anything here. The group as a whole feel way better than the Gen 6 Megas. Shows a really good range from badass to goofy and serious to Game Freak trolling. My biggest complaint actually comes with their distribution. Inkay comes very early with a grind or at the very end of the game and doesn't get its Mega Stone until the very end. This was obviously held back so that Emma's Mega Malamar Ace could be revealed. Now, I think personally, instead of revealing Ampharos in the early game, why not have her reveal Malamar there? Or I suppose if you were like really set, you could have her reveal her Malamar right before the sewers, which is like right before you get it. Pyroar is kind of in the same boat with its Mega Stone in rank A. You can at least pick this up super high level with its alpha. Don't do it. Wild Zone 17 is never worth it. But yeah, this thing is just way too late for getting 20 plus in every stat. They obviously delayed it because of Grizel's Pyroar, but like, I don't think that's worth it to delay the Pokemon and make it ultimately not usable. You've also got Dragalge locked to B rank while not good enough to be locked that late. Scrafty kind of also fills this role. As we talked about before, Starmie comes at B rank at the same time as Dragonite and Tyranitar. That's kind of an issue. It is at least really good in the early game, I guess. So we'd put Starmie a tier lower and then also put Venusaur just at rank F with the other Mega Starter stones from Kanto. Words. Now, of course, the worst offender here are the Kalos starter Mega Stones. These guys are locked behind a Nintendo Switch Online subscription and weren't even all obtainable on release. I do think it's disingenuous to act like this is paywalling a massive part of the game. Like, a lot of people have been saying this game is $100 to play on day one, and it's like, dude, the DLC doesn't even release until December. You don't need the random outfit pre-order bonus. Calling this day one DLC is just such a dishonest argument, especially in a game that has room for a ton of honest criticism. Just to really clarify where I stand on this point, like, you can say it's tone deaf to announce the DLC before it releases, or that DLC in general sucks. I'm just saying that misinformation isn't helping that case. But anyway, side tangent. I think if they were gonna do something greasy like this, they should have done it for the Kanto starters, right? Get all those suckers that are just going for the nostalgia bait, right? Make them get stuck with the, Nintendo Online purchase, and then give us the Kalos starter stones. That would be so much more fair considering that the Kanto starters already outshone the Kalos ones in X and Y. Also, online, I've just been seeing so many people saying that Mega Zygarde kind of completes this thing being a Digimon, and I'm so here for that discussion, and I think it's sick. Rank B. Story and characters. Okay, so I've just got some kind of all over the place thoughts on characters and story and how I would tweak it, but like no major overarching changes because that is outside the scope of a legacy game. Starting on characters, Urbane or Tawny is generally one of the better written rivals. Like just a compelling and believable character doing the good rival trope well, but her mom reveal was kind of underwhelming and I think they shouldn't have put it in the post game. Now for Lita, the fact that you don't fight her with Starmie until the post game kind of sucks, but that's because her actual story arc is really strong. She doesn't want to evolve Starmie because she's worried it could ruin her dancing and get her kicked out of her dance school, which is like the entire reason she moved to Lumiose. She's also conflicted because Starmie would improve her battling and she's worried she's falling behind the rest of Team MZ. And like, I don't know, there's just a lot of stuff going on here that is very real. It is not groundbreaking, but it's substance. Also, going into rogue fights with Lita, she has a very cool little like dance animation. And I don't know, it just kind of hyped me up for every rogue mega fight with her. As for Naveen, he kind of just struggles with like a smooth landing. He ran away from home and joined Team MZ after his grandmother threw away his sewing kit because he was watching Canary streams instead of doing schoolwork. Seems like his arc should be learning to break from parasocial relationships, learn how to grow with his newfound family. This would have been symbolized by him slowly getting closer to eating the stupid croissant curry, and then, give his character somewhere to go after the Canary fight, because like as the game stands, he just kind of has no development and doesn't learn anything. I also found the scene where Lita bullies him into talking about his backstory out of character for her. Considering the rest of her character, I feel like after he gets uncomfortable, she would back off and suggest a battle to sort of like lighten the tension and kind of get his mind off it. Now, coming over from X and Y, AZ was a badly written character just due to not having enough time. So leaning on him in this game meant that Game Freak needed to deliver on the character. The first great decision we have is in leaving AZ's past as a big reveal at the end of the game. This is smart because it both works for people who didn't play X and Y because they get a legitimately crazy reveal, and for people that have played X and Y, they get some dramatic irony in seeing the player character not know, followed by the huge payoff they've been waiting for all these years. We get to see AZ's role as a father figure. The harmonized Hotel Z theme emphasizes his change in demeanor. He's no longer doing good deeds seeking redemption, but instead he's just doing what he thinks is a good thing. So when you know about his ending, you realize like this whole game is his eulogy. His gravestone says, here lies AZ, who mastered both creation and destruction, a man of beginnings and endings. For 3,000 years he lived, finding no fellowship with others as he wandered the world's byways. But in Lumiose, he discovered faithful friends and was reunited with his most beloved Pokemon. It was in Lumiose 2 that he breathed his last. Throughout the game, AZ often jokes about his aging body, reflecting on his past, and has an irregular cough. AZ tells you about the machine he built over Prism Tower to share Floette's eternal life energy with everyone. He built that trying to redeem himself from the ultimate weapon, which is basically an analogy for the nuclear bombs dropped over Nagasaki and Hiroshima. He doesn't tell you that this machine has been sharing Floette's eternal life energy with him, which is what has been keeping him alive all these years. It's genius and hits so hard when you know what's coming, but is also conspicuous enough that it doesn't ruin the true game ending. Like, holy shit, man, this is good. This is not just like good for Pokemon. This is good writing. I like it. I am very satisfied. And I think the mark of this doing a good job is now that I've been going back and playing a lot of X and Y, I found that it's actually made me like this character more. So AZ really hits on the note of like this game being a love letter to X and Y. I'm also really happy with the game's side characters. Canary is the most standout to me because of how much I thought I was going to hate her and then ended up liking her. For those that don't know, I've been a YouTuber for like 10 plus years now, main channel, the SmithPlays. I was a streamer for many years on that channel. I am very familiar with the streaming grind. I initially saw Canary, said, oh my God, they're doing the firefighting starter, except for electric female streamers, and kind of dismissed her. The first thing I liked about this character is that like she actually has a very real setup. You'd be surprised to know how many streamers just have like completely scuffed setups like that are just shoehorned into a room and look nice on camera, but horrible everywhere else. I also love that her catchphrase, Thunderwave, is like such a clear reference to PewDiePie's Brofist. It's like, it's cringy, but like so nostalgic for me who grew up in that era of YouTube. This applies to everyone, but I also like that because she makes so many appearances, they actually get to expand on her character. I love that we learn about her friendship with Gwen, and overall, Canary makes me realize how poorly Iono was implemented. Like looking back now, Iono feels like a modern day out of touch celebrity trying to insert themselves into the streaming scene, and Canary feels like someone who is an authentic streamer. And actually, I might even like Tarragon more. Seeing this dude all hunched over at the start of the game sets up a beautiful subversion when you actually fight him. First, you learn that he's been controlling the hologram of Canary, which canonically makes him the first VTuber in Pokemon. But what really stuck with me is the moment his fight starts, he hits this pose where he just seems to gain full composure, exuding this competence and mastery as a Pokemon trainer. And it's these sorts of touches littered all throughout the game that make these trainers having Mega Evolution feel so compelling. Pretty sure every single trainer has like some sort of cool thing with their Mega Stone, and it is a nice detail. I also think I like the LeBon subversion. At first I dismissed this character as Game Freak wanting to remind us why they aren't called Game Normal. But when you learn about LeBon like actually being this like super high energy, like crazy character, I just was like, hell yeah, I like the real LeBon. I also really like Corbeau. And when I made that shorter video, sort of defending this game from the disinformed criticism, a lot of people came back at me for saying like, oh, he's a good character, this is good story, it's this piece of shit guy like basically scamming a girl. And it's like, no, actually, that's not the point. Corbeau is a loan shark, and that is shitty, but Corbeau is meant to represent a mob boss in Japan, which is called Weebra knows what's coming. We're about to get a crazy, crazy editing moment. The Yakuza. Anyway, the point is that in a lot of societies, mobs weren't purely evil. They often served parts of their communities to gain favor with the citizens. So I like Corbo's role because it serves as a more grounded view of the evil team. Corbo has received a lot of criticism for the whole loan shark plotline. And yeah, this is understandable because honestly, this plotline is not very well developed. If he's an anti-hero that takes spoiled people and tricks them into doing community service but always pays their debts back, how is he so rich himself, and why target Tawny, who is evidently struggling for money? His actions and backstory growing up poor and orphaned don't really line up with this. So the story is unfinished, and this is how I would fix it. There's a passing mention that Philippe is the one that actually gave Tawny the loan, and it's also mentioned that he was the former boss of the Rust Syndicate. So what if he was the true villain of the Rust Syndicate? Because Corbo is now the head of the group, he has to save face and maintain the strict vice grip on loans and debt, but can also completely veto them at will. As the head of the syndicate, he has to accept responsibility for his underlings' actions, and such his hands are still muddied by Philippe's legally dubious activities. I also think a lot of the sort of gut reactionary hate has failed to read into the implications of the Casortico story. Okay, so at the end of the game, you find out that CEO Jet knew about Prism Tower's energy leakage problem and covered it up despite obviously being a danger to people. People have been complaining that like, oh, Casortico are just the good guys. It's Nintendo thinking they're the good guys. And it's like, congrats, you don't know how to read. People have been asking for more depth in Pokemon games, and it's like, yeah, this isn't amazing, but it's kind of a realistic world scenario. Like, just a classic corporation story. She's not going out of her way to hurt people, but she doesn't care about them either. But with the note that a lot of people obviously missed this, like maybe Game Freak could have done a better job in making it more obvious. The issue with that is then people would complain that it's too in your face. Mabel was another surprisingly well done character. She shows up for like 2 fights, and now like going back to play X and Y, I'm like, hell yeah, it's Mabel. Another thing the game did well was actually not including lots of X and Y characters. The issue with doing this would have been that it kind of sucks away the attention from all these new characters that you're trying to establish within your story. They were very strict with this to the point that there was no Sycamore. Clement was maybe a weird one. Like, I'm sure the city still has gym leaders, right? I think if I was gonna add someone, that's the only character I would add, like super minor thing, but he is the gym leader of Lumiose, so kind of felt weird that he wasn't there. Every other trainer not included though, well done. I especially admire the restraint in not using Diantha whatsoever. Regardless of how you feel about Diantha, she would have made the game worse. I and many others are in the boat of just hating this character. I like physically get mad when she is on screen in X and Y, but I also have to imagine that a lot of people who started playing Pokemon in X and Y kind of view her as like the way that I view red or blue. And so putting Diantha in the game would really detract again from the other characters. Conversely though, I was very happy with Lysander. Seeing Lysander in X and Y now is weird, man. It's like, oh God, this was a bad character. And that is particularly due to the fact that L is done quite well. Like AZ wasn't a poorly written character, he just wasn't written, but Lysander is a mess. And you know, they kind of back themselves into a corner where it's like, how do you make this not suck? So I suppose like the Hoy Amnesia thing is a bit of a cop-out, but it was the only way for them to do it. And I think his presence and like the role that he fills in this game does bring a lot of value. I also need to note that the soundtrack is very cohesive. Whether you personally like it isn't the point. I just think the fact that it's like super cohesive is a sign of them doing a good job with it. As for the rest of the story and pacing, I'm kind of torn. The opening tutorial is pretty rough. The game cuts to black and fades into a cutscene to explain things that just could so have easily been dialogue boxes popping up over Tawny's head. There's other bad decisions, like during the first battle zone, you shouldn't have to talk to Naveen or Lita. But outside of another clunky Game Freak tutorial, I do really like the general early game. Nothing happens for a bit, and I think like Pokemon has been missing that. It kind of gives some space for us to sit with these characters and get a feel for them before important stuff starts happening, and it results in a more satisfying conclusion. The general pacing was also quite good. The game is always giving you something new. It does, however, kind of suffer from but then storytelling syndrome. Like a good story will say X happened, and because of X, Y, so then the character's Z. In ZA, the story is basically just this happened, and then this happened, and then this happens, and the only thing loosely tying it together is the overarching ZA Royale. I do also need to praise the end fights, not those fights, but like the ones before it. Back up, yeah, those ones there. Okay, tower goes crazy, and you're trying to get to Zygarde. You're running around the city with all these characters you've now met, battling groups of rogue kind of mega evolved Pokemon. This was one of my favorite experiences of my entire Pokemon career. Specifically, the moment that Mega Gallade and Gardevoir pull up on you, I was screaming. Another good example of this game having sort of anime feel to it. Like, dude, it's the Ralts duo. You've got Gallade, the front man, fighting you, while Gardevoir is sitting in the back sending off big shots. Like, it was just so cool. And it wasn't just cool, but it added so much personality to these two Pokemon. Like, perfect version of ZA would have this, but like all the time. And it does a good job of it, right? But this is a particularly great example. I think the other examples of this like had really good type combinations, which made for interesting battles, but they weren't as cool as this duo. Gengar and Heracross pull up together, and like, I guess it fits because they both have high attack stats. I just can't help but imagine how much cooler it would have been if it was Gengar and Alakazam, you know? Like the OG Gen 1 nukes just showing modern day kids that like, the boys still got it. Similarly, Garchomp does not fit whatsoever with Kangaskhan and Pidgeot, nor does Blastoise and Steelix. Aggron and Salamence were actually pretty sick because like they're both from Hoenn, and Agrod is like a semi-pseudo. And while Alakazam, Arrow, and Metagross were imposing, I think Garchomp and Metagross would have been the play. You could have then had Steelix, Scizor, and maybe even add in Heracross to make for like a nice Johto pairing. And then honestly, Blastoise, Pidgeot, and Aerodactyl would have made for like a really sick Kanto pair. So it certainly could have been better, but this particular section was like the peak of gameplay. Just wish the final boss fight could have been as good. I guess it's new ground for Pokemon, but like, it's just, you're just fighting flowers over and over. And I think in 2025, we can all ask for a little bit more. I think a small improvement would have had the player ascending the tower. So you get like maybe even the same flowers, but in 3 separate areas, and you know, they're getting stronger or something. Then at the top, you have Mega Zygarde freely attack the big tower head. Like the moves Zygardes use look cool, but like you don't have choice here. You're just pressing a button and seeing a cool animation. So if we were making the perfect version of ZA, I would make that fix to the flower heads and then have the actual final fight have Zygarde freely moving around. Rank A, voice acting. You like what we did there? We did 10 parts because there's like 10 levels in the ZA Royale. Gosh, I hope there's not 11. Anyway, with that said, the final cutscenes of this game are very fun. And I think it kind of allows us to sort of neatly bring this back to voice acting. Outside of maybe graphic criticism, I think voice acting has been the most parroted thing that players wanted out of this game. And I think as you saw at the start of this video, it would have had a huge impact in every aspect of the game. Now, I have another voice acting scene where the lines don't actually match up with the character's movements, but I paid for it, and the voice actor, who kindly asked not to be named, did a really good job with it, so let's just watch it.
Look, I'm trying to get our hotel guests to safety. Would you please let us through?
Too bad for the guest. Once you step into a battle zone, you're a target like everyone else.
If that's how you want to play it, then take me on.
Okay, so voice acting is obviously cool, but I still think that there is room for nuance in this discussion. Voice acting is not like a prerequisite to a quality game. And I think stylistically, in some cases, even in 2025, can be the incorrect approach. Like sometimes simplicity is good. You can look at the thumbnails on this channel, and if you hated me, you'd say like, those are lazy thumbnails. But it's like, no, that's a very intentional, stylistic, simple approach. The point that I'm trying to make is like simplicity doesn't automatically equate to bad. And for a series that's been around for like 30 years and never had voice acting, I can understand Game Freak's hesitation. For probably worse, a lack of voice acting has become very synonymous with the identity of Pokemon games. But it's actually this point that is the reason that I come back to this as our final topic, because I feel like voice acting is very broadly representative of my main overarching issues with Pokemon Legends ZA. Similar to Minecraft, Pokemon is in a very challenging spot when it comes to innovating. And Nintendo can say that the Legends games are mainline games all they want. The broader Pokemon community does not view them as such. And the Legends games are broadly identified by players as Pokemon's place to experiment. And so I think that at any point in this game, you see an unwillingness to then do that. It's very frustrating. Like, yes, the game's final fight is really new, but it plays it so safe. The rogue battles are a general highlight, but they still lack cohesion and a true finished polish. Yes, ZA Royale is a compelling idea, so why would you have such a poor implementation of it? The new battle system is fun, but was this really the place to trim things down? And for putting the game in a single city, wild zones are, yes, a great fix to the constraints associated with that idea. But why play it so safe? And like, if this is truly going to be Game Freak's room to experiment, then how can you possibly justify not having voice acting? ZA feels like it's caught between a true desire to experiment and corporate overreach preventing that from actually happening. Probably at least like a little bit of a money thing. I just kind of wish that this game had gone full send. Like, even if it had failed, the voice acting was bad, it felt awkward for Pokemon, or the wild zones were like over the top, like at least you're failing with a huge effort and showing the community your willingness to try new stuff. And I think that's ultimately the big factor in what makes this a great Pokemon game, but not a great video game. Because it is great. Like, Legends ZA is my favorite Pokemon game on the Switch. It is the most fun I have had with Pokemon in I don't even know how many years, but as I do with everything on this channel, I like to imagine how things could have been better. And that comes from a personal belief that I have. I believe that if you truly want to see the Pokemon series improve, that path does not lie in rage baiting, hate-fueled hit pieces, using Switch 1 gameplay on an emulator, telling you the whole map is one coded model loaded all the time. Anger is easy, but making up lies about the game is not actually going to lead to better Pokemon games. The path to better Pokemon games lies in constructive criticism to generate community discussion. Or, you know, just add roller skates.